this is a point that I made years ago. I remember I was out to dinner with a group of friends, probably about 8 years ago now, and this was when a shooting happened in Paris. There was a radical theocratic Islamic extremist.
Is it the Charlie Hebdo?
It may have been. I think it may have been. I can't remember the particulars of the situation, but I remember we were out to dinner. I got the news notification. You know, I looked at the article and I went, "Oh my goodness, this is horrible." And a girl that I was out to dinner with my friends, who I hadn't met before, she said, "You're only upset about it because it's happening in the first world." And I said, horrible things like this happen in the third world all the time. And when they start happening in the first world, which is anomalous in the sense that it is the first time in history we've had this much wealth, this much peace, this much strength in terms of law and order, at least in certain countries we did. And when we chip away at that, it doesn't make the third world better. It just means there are now fewer places in the world where people aren't being killed by these rogue theocrats. And so what leftists will do is they'll say, okay, well, you know, your country is very wealthy and you're upset about these bad things happening in your country, but you're not concerned about what's happening in a migrant's country or why they need to come here. Okay, but here's the point. If the way of life that we have here is eliminated, it's not going to come back. It's very likely that it won't come back for a very, very long time, and it's not going to make life better for the people in these countries that they're trying to escape. There's just going to be nowhere left to run to.
You brought up a great point, and I agree with everything you say. I'm just I'm impressed at your kindness, because my answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Like, I am concerned it's happening in...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
that's what I said.
Well, if I'm not concerned about it, yeah.
Yes.
Who's concerned about my country, right? If you say you have to be concerned about what's happening in Rwanda, okay, well, Rwandans are worried about that, and now we're worried about that. Who's responsible for worrying about what happens in America?
Yep.
Right? No, if someone has... I love how leftists can make accusations like that. You're only concerned because it's happening in your country. Damn straight!
Yeah, well, it's like,
right?
Yes,
I live here.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
happening.
like it here.
No, you're only concerned that your mom has cancer because she's your mom. It's
Right.
like,
Yes, exactly.
No, but this girl that you were at dinner with, I bet she said that.
No, hold on. It was a group of us. I was not like on a date with this girl. Okay, I just want to be clear.
Seamus has never been on a date in his life.
Not once, not a single time. I want you all to know. Not with that kind of woman.
Okay.
girls who would date you during the wedding.
No, I'm honestly not liberal, but here's the thing: if they're liberal women,
I love this. No, stop talking. I'm done with
this is Love Doctor with Seamus Coughlin.
Okay. But what I'm going to say is, this girl who you were at dinner in a group with turned to you and said this because she feels as though she has to knock you out of bed. Do you think this girl thinks about the third world ever? Except for when it comes to you? No.
Except when she does that.
Ask her one news update. Ask her to cite
I should have told her to finish her dinner because they're starving kids in Africa or something like that. Hold the mom line out on her.
Ask her to name one outlet in a third world country. Ask her to name one news source, one journalist, one political leader. She could not do it. She only said it to make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting.
Well, fortunately, it didn't work.
No,
it didn't work, and I don't think she was expecting
there wasn't a second date. I mean, there wasn't a second group dinner.
We were literally out for a friend's birthday. And it was one of her. It was one of her friends. It was an interesting conversation. Anyway, so the left.
I'm so excited.
The left has a law and order. The left has a law and order problem, and they have a law and order problem when it comes to people entering the country illegally, when it comes to people committing violent crime, when it comes to groups that they consider to be marginalized or oppressed. But then they become proponents of ruling with an iron fist whenever it comes time to prosecute somebody on the right or who has done something that the left uses as a threat to their power. So a judge has denied a bid by Q Shaman to toss out his January 6th conviction. A federal judge Thursday denied a bid by January 6th rioter Jacob Chansley, better known as the Q Shaman. They're calling him QAnon Shaman. It's Q Shaman, okay? To vacate...
Why would you know that, though?
to vacate his conviction in light of footage, not incoming investigation. You know, this is... I'm done for now, HC.
Sorry.
To vacate his conviction in light of footage from the Capitol that day aired by ex-Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Chansley, who stood out from the January 6th crowd for wearing face paint and a orange headdress, actually thought he did it pretty well. Stood up during the riot, pleaded guilty to obstruction and was sentenced in November 2021 to 41 months. Now, this is something I want to mention. I was being a little tongue-in-cheek there. What happened on J6 was on one side of the building, you did have people who broke through the window and broke in. On the other side of the building, the police literally opened the doors and let people in. So you had just a lot of regular people who were there as protesters, who were walking through. and were catching charges because of it. It's crazy. There was actually a judge who had to let somebody off because the footage that they had of the event proves that he basically went and told, he spoke to a police officer, and he wasn't told that he couldn't leave. In order to charge him with trespassing, you can't think that they're allowed to be there. But of course, we know that he left. They don't care about law and order at all, and that goes in two directions. That goes A, in the direction of not prosecuting people who are breaking the law, and of course prosecuting people who didn't break the law, and refusing to exonerate someone even when footage comes out showing that they were not guilty of the crime of which they were accused. Now that said, in this particular story, I can't give you all the intricacies and details. It's possible that they still had something on him, but overall, with the pattern that I've seen with these hearings, they're all too willing to be as harsh as possible on people who really either have a very good excuse or actually didn't break the law at all. And there are some people who were genuinely violent who should be locked up. There's no question about that. But again, we don't see any of the people who broke down the barricades at the White House being arrested. There was not an investigation into the 2020 riots, despite a majority of the American population wanting investigations. According to polling data, far more people than wanted investigations into January 6th, because the J6 investigations were not about protecting the American people or our democracy. They're about protecting people in power and having you ignore the fact that cities were literally set on fire and allowed to burn for several months.
Well, it is a crime to withhold exculpatory evidence, and that's what the
Fair enough.
J6 committee
Yeah, that's true.
did. And if that had been extended to other famous cases, you think of Hands Up, Don't Shoot, you think of Kyle Rittenhouse, right? When evidence comes out, different angles, different cameras, different footage, and you get to paint the whole picture, it somehow changes the verdict a little bit because the jury sees everything. There was no jury, obviously, in the J6 trial, but the fact that they withheld all of this, and obviously this footage wasn't brought into Jacob Chansley's, it's shameful for the judge, right?
Yep.
And it's shameful for Benny Thomas and the entire J6 committee and all the people who partook in it. That's why the Republicans turned so much on Liz Cheney, why they turned so much on Adam Kinzinger. Not because they were part of J6, but because they knew that they were withholding evidence like this. They knew that they were withholding crucial pieces of data to tell the full story, and wanted to act Trump.
Yep.
And that's an unforgivable crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. This is a complete perversion of justice. I do remember reading that story, now that you mention it, that evidence was actually withheld. I mean, again, these people care nothing for rule of law. They don't care about the process. They care about the outcome.
Yeah, the evidence that Tucker showed of the Capitol Police walking Jacob.
I saw that, yeah.
Walking him up the stairs, the door was locked, they found another door, they opened up the door, they walked him to the floor of the Capitol.
Gave him a back rub, brought him hot cocoa.
Yeah, he gave his prayer, thank you, Lord God Almighty, for the United States Senate, thank you for the Capitol Police who are keeping us safe. And then they walked him out and he went home.
Yep.
So, again, the people can say, well, he still broke the law by being there, but that...
This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com. Podcasts are a kind of escapism, but when you need to actually get away, there's Booking.com. You can choose from thousands of unique stays across the U.S., from hotels and beach houses to wooden cabins and dreamy vacation homes. So whatever type of trip you want to take, lying on the beach, camping in nature, exploring new cities, find your perfect place to stay. Booking.com. Booking.com.
really changes things a little bit from the narrative that they showed at J6.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that somebody is a trespasser when police officers literally walk them through the building and tell them that they can be there. I mean,
you would have thought if he was doing something illegal, they would have perhaps been the one to notice it.
yeah,
It's kind of crazy. I know that's a crazy expectation.
the police were in on the insurrection.
But why aren't they getting brought up on charges then?
Well, because if that evidence had been showed, who were those cops? Those cops now have to testify. Why did you walk Jacob Chansley?
And
did you get an order? How did you think?
And we already made the Capitol Police the heroes of this story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
unravels.
I was I got the chance to sit in on opening when we did opening statements for the Cowboy trial. This group of guys that were selected by the U.S. government to represent the masterminds of the conspiracy, right? Because there were a couple people who they like swapped in and out at the last minute. It was crazy. But one of the things that I remember the most, and I wrote about it for Timcast News, if you want to find that article, is
Good job,
thanks. Was that the U.S. government first, and it was like, here is a clip of text messages that happened, here is a video, or here is a voice memo, and then all you know, each man is represented by their own attorneys. There are a lot of attorneys. They have lots to say. But most of the time, they just expand it. Instead of taking one tiny clip, like the U.S. government, they're like, here's the context of what they're saying. And it was very difficult. I think one of the attorneys there said it best. These men couldn't organize ordering as a group from McDonald's. You think they organized a conspiracy? But the fact of the matter is, you know, the U.S. government, really the American media, needs someone to take the fall. They need to have whipped the people into a frenzy, and they cannot say that there was no one at fault here.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is disturbing, right? Because we are not carrying out justice for the people. We are carrying out justice for this corporation and the administrative blow that says we did the right thing and we will prove it to you legal things.
Well, even the whole narrative surrounding January 6th and the idea that it's an insurrection is so unbelievably ridiculous. These people were grasping at any straw they can possibly grab at to try to indict and criminalize Donald Trump or prosecute Donald Trump, make him out to seem as if he was trying to support our democratic process, when in reality they were doing that, which is fraudulent, nonsensical investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election and his collaboration with them. And you actually look at the narrative, what they're effectively saying is that Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, the most powerful person on the planet, with all of the resources available to the executive branch at his fingertips, wanted to overturn a fair and free election, and his genius plan to do so was by dog whistling to a bunch of boomers to go inside of the Capitol and not do anything violent. What? He literally, an incredible plan. He literally said, go have your voices heard. He didn't tell them to be violent. He told them to be non-violent. He told them to go protest.
Yeah.
Not break in, but even so, if he had some kind of secret dog whistle that only the other conservatives could hear, and that's why they went in there, it seems like a pretty lame thing to dog whistle when you're trying to overthrow the United States government, to get a group of people. I mean, it really was a mostly peaceful insurrection. It was the only person who was harmed. The only person who was harmed was one of the protesters, poor Ashley Babbitt. That woman was killed. That woman was killed. If someone was killed at a BLM protest, they would be a martyr for the country. I'm not kidding. We would have statues of them. We would have statues of them. The police officer who shot them would be locked up, and we would melt the key down and then pour the metals it was made of down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. So I'm desperately digging in my backpack because I have a relevant note.
Looking for a point to make?
Well, someone told me that there was another protester at January 6th who had a heart attack and then later died.
I heard about that.
But we don't hear his name, so I'm just trying to see if I can pull up my notes. No one quote me on this.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a second to find those, but this is something we always saw. Listen!
I think that person was still on the mall, actually.
Yeah.
I think facts are right. I think that person didn't even make it to the Capitol, and I think they were older. I think they were...
Kevin really has a name? Nobody quote me on this.
Nope.
Media. I'm just looking back at my notes.
The media.
But it is interesting because people did suffer because of the drive, and the representation is that they were all armed and dangerous and crazy, and Donald Trump sent them there. And meanwhile, the video showed these supposed leaders saying, no one go in, don't go in there. Like, this is the worst insurrection ever. The leaders who apparently conspired to do this are telling you not to go in there.
Yeah, that's a really bad idea.
I just don't understand. And especially because we did not see the same kind of vicious pursuit of people who really did burn businesses in the summer of 2020. How can you say that this is worth spending, I'm going to go back to our first story, millions of dollars investigating, right?
Yep.
How come we don't have a system of justice that represents people outside of Washington? If you were an American voter and you had a business that burned in Minneapolis or in any major city, and you know that they just said, we're going to let them go. They didn't feel for it, and it's okay. But because it happened to us, the federal government, we are going to use the full weight of our purse strings to go after these people.
It's so crazy
exactly
how fast it shifted focus from like everything else they were going after Trump for, and then all of a sudden, like I was watching it live, I'm like, okay, so now this has happened, everything else was forgotten about essentially.
Yeah.
And the main focus and a show trial on this for the next however many years.
Yeah.
And all for what? Like it's crazy.
Absolutely. Well, one thing old HC over there mentioned that I want to touch on was that there were people who passed there, and what ended up happening is there were people who didn't die at January 6th, but died later, and then it was like COVID-19 2019 where we just said they died with January 6th.
Yeah.
And it was like because of January 6th that they died, even though they died a significant amount of time later. I mean, what a ridiculous way of measuring the mortality of an event. Did we do that to the BLM riots, by the way? Did we consider any of the people who committed suicide or died because their business was burnt down? Did we keep track of whether that happened to add to that death count? No, of course not. Because they were they were grasping at straws to make it into something that it wasn't.
Kevin Greason is the name of the report.
Okay.